Hello and welcome to this episode of the Huron Chamber Connect podcast. My name is Colin Carmichael. I'm the executive director of the Huron Chamber of Commerce and the host of the podcast. Before we get started today, I realized that this isn't a real podcast unless I ask you to like and subscribe on all of the various podcasts platforms. So if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, awesome. But just want to let folks know that you can actually find this podcast on all of the major podcast platforms. So Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, whatever, Apple Music. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode when they come out every Friday morning, bright and early, then I recommend you subscribe to the podcast on one of those platforms, or just keep watching on YouTube and Facebook, and that's fine too. So with that out of the way, and I promise I won't make that pitch every week, but I'm very pleased to have as my guest this week Genelle Reid. She is the Fund Development Coordinator at Artemis Huron. Now, if Artemis Huron doesn't sound familiar to you, you're not alone. It's a new name for an organization that has been around for decades, and I will let Genelle talk a bit about that. But before I do that, welcome to the podcast, Genelle. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much, Colin. I'm really glad to be here today. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but before we get into what Artemis Huron is and what it was, I feel like in the interest of full disclosure, I should let viewers know that I once upon a time served on the board of what was not then called Artemis Huron, but I do kind of have a personal connection to the organization. Notice how I'm keeping everyone in suspense. This is, really,
Love
what are
it.
we talking about? And yeah, so I should also mention, because I sometimes forget when I do these interviews that Artemis Huron is a member of the Huron Chamber of Commerce, and as one of our we have quite a few nonprofit members. So it's great for me to be able to work again with you folks in my new chamber role. So why don't we dispel with the suspense, Genelle? I'll turn things over to you, and you can explain to us what Artemis Huron was, and just kind of introduce yourself and the organization.
Yes. Thank you so much, Colin. And yes, I appreciate the suspense you're keeping us in. I'm Genelle Reid. As Colin mentioned, I'm the Fund Development Coordinator for Artemis Huron. For decades, our organization has been known in the community as the Huron Women's Shelter, second stage housing and counseling services. See, the name was so long, I couldn't even string it together properly.
It didn't fit on anyone's business card, as I recall. It was
No, or checks, and that's a problem, honestly. So we've supported women and children impacted by gender-based violence, providing safety, healing, and advocacy right here on Huron County for the last 40 plus years.
Yeah, and so as I mentioned, I was on the board a few years ago, and I think there's well, actually, before we get to that, why don't we talk about the name a little bit, and where the name has come from, I mean, a little bit about the process, I guess, because I remember when I was on the board, we were talking about a rebrand. That was several years ago, and it's been a process to find the right, not just name, right, but the right identity for the organization, and we can go from that into kind of what all of the things that the organization does, that Artemis Huron does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we changed our name, and that wasn't because we thought our old name was broken or that we were lost, but because we felt like we had grown. We'd grown from what the name Women's Shelter and the list of all of our services, second stage, and counseling. We serve more than just what that list provides. So over time, our work expanded beyond the walls of the shelter. We're not just there for women in crisis anymore. We're walking with them through the whole journey of healing. And the name Artemis just felt right. In mythology, she is the goddess of protection, transition, and the wild. All things that really mirror the work that we're doing here at Artemis Huron. She's strong, watchful, and deeply caring. And she's connected to the moon, which reminds us that healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes in phases, like the lunar cycle, in waves. There's light in that healing journey, there's shadow. And we kept Huron in our name because this community is home. It's where our roots are. It's where the organization started 40 years ago as Survival Through Friendship House. We've had many names. So it just felt right to bring us into this new era. And Artemis Huron is what we've chosen.
Good. And we should mention that this is a very new change. It was only 2 weeks ago or so that the new identity was unveiled at your AGM, which I was pleased to be at and be there for the unveiling. And so that I suppose that brings us nicely to what Artemis Huron does in the community. What your role is sounds a little strange, but the how you serve, as you said, the women and children who are victims of gender-based violence, and we can maybe get into the various forms of gender-based violence as well, because I think you and I were just talking just before we started recording about all the there are always new ways for this to occur. The types of abuse that we often think physical, but it often goes into psychological and as you said, coercive. And I'll let you're the expert on that, not me, but I'll let you talk about how Artemis does the work that it does, and why it's so crucial for our communities.
Yeah, so ultimately, our role is to support women and children and teens, youth that have been impacted by gender-based violence. That it happens in all sorts of different ways. So we have a 24-hour crisis line that's available for anyone in the community, whether you yourself think you may be being abused, and that's in all the ways that we had mentioned: physical, sexual, verbal, financial, coercive control. There's many different ways in which abuse can show up in a relationship. Um, if you feel as though that's happening to you, you think it might be, or you're seeing it happen to someone else in the community, you can give Artemis Huron a call anytime at our crisis line number listed on our website. You can also reach out to us for referrals to our counseling programs. So we provide counseling for women that have been impacted by gender-based violence. We also provide sexual violence counseling as well. And then we have a children's program that provides children and youth counseling in the schools, or you can come to any one of our buildings across the county to receive counseling services from our child and youth counselor. Her programs also have some group programming options as well. So we have the children's program, we have crisis line, and then we also have our emergency shelter as well. So that's for folks that need the safety of our building for whatever reason that might be. And we have 8 beds here at our emergency shelter. And women can stay here. It's a secure building. We offer programming within the building, counseling within the building. And then we also provide meals for the women throughout the week. There's all kinds of different sort of things going on. We have services that come in to shelter as well to provide outreach service for the women. We also have our transition program, which we also like to call Next Steps. This is a program that supports women outside of our shelter. So anyone in the community that's maybe working through leaving an abusive relationship. Maybe they're currently in an abusive relationship and they want to know what the steps might look like to leave. They can reach out for transition support. The transition counselor is going to help with system navigation, help you potentially find employment. So working on resumes, it will be helping you through the court process if you're dealing with family court or criminal court. Our transition program essentially is that bridge that kind of bridges you out of the crisis and back into community. Or it also can be just you're in community and you need a little extra support, and that's transition as well. Then we have our second stage program, which we have 3 buildings across the county, one in Goderich, one in Clinton, and one in Exeter. And those are more of an apartment style living for folks that are kind of getting back on their feet after maybe they've been displaced because of domestic violence. And that is again a program. So there's programming available within each building for the women that are a part of the programs, and it's up to a 1 year stay, and that's flexible, but just so that we know we're helping them find more permanent housing after that, whether that's county housing or market rent. We have lots of resources for women to look for housing once they're in the second stage program. Um, I think I covered all of the programs. It feels like there's
Oh,
quite a, oh, and then we also, sorry, there's a few more that I am
no, of
missing.
course. Go ahead.
We have some interagency work that's going on as well around gender-based violence. So that is agencies across both Huron and Perth counties that have come together to work on just the issues of gender-based violence in the community, and having other organizations sit at a table for 1 hour a month and just to talk about what the trends are, how we as organizations can start working together better to support women, because we know often femicide happens when community collaboration isn't happening. So when we are able to collaborate as a community, we can ensure that women are safer and we are keeping the femicide numbers down as best we can.
Yeah, allows for some proactive and those kinds of things to work ahead of those. Oh, I wonder if we could talk. And now, I'm well out of my area of expertise here, and so I'm trying to frame this in a way. But I guess there's a traditional notion of what we might have called domestic abuse, or spousal abuse, and through media and lived experience. I think a lot of us have uh, some idea of what that traditional sense of I guess what we now call gender-based violence is. But there are and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like there are more and more ways of that gender-based violence kind of manifests in the community, and I think also that the complexity and the diversity of relationships in the community, and it's not just your traditional nuclear family with a husband and a wife and and then there's a some violence, and there's a response there. I mean, that was the kind of the traditional view of this 30 years ago, and more recently, obviously, but maybe talk about the various ways that gender-based violence manifests in the community, and the how Artemis and your partners, and you've talked a bit about how you do that, but deal with those.
Yeah. So I think you're maybe referring to a little bit too about like how the violence seems to have gone underground a little bit. So like
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, our society, as it becomes more progressive, and we become more aware, the violence kind of becomes more invisible in some ways. So it's often pushed underground, masked by social media, isolation, economic stress, or coercive control. And that doesn't leave visible bruises. So the numbers haven't necessarily gone down, but we in rural areas actually see higher rates of violence with fewer resources. So whether there's higher rates and maybe less reporting, because folks are just struggling to reach out or not knowing where to reach out when the violence is happening. So the need for Artemis Huron and for safe spaces, for advocacy and education, it's as strong as ever right now. It's not just about crisis response, it's about prevention, and building systems and communities that understand, believe, and support survivors as well. So that's engaging in some trainings potentially. There's a neighbors, friends, and family training available currently for folks to take that they can teach themselves a bit about how to recognize violence in the community and how to respond and what to do in those situations. And if folks in the community take the time to do those trainings, then maybe we can have a better eye on some of those acts of violence that go unnoticed that maybe
Mm.
we aren't seeing
What,
as
yeah, what about in the workplace? We'll bring this back to the chamber in terms
yeah.
of, and of course we're more than just a collection of workplaces, but I assume that there, are there resources that employers can provide for employees in terms of how to, manage these things, or managers. And actually this came up at we have a HR peer network group, and we meet monthly just to talk about HR issues. And our last meeting, we were talking about promoting positive mental health in the workplace, and so that was a really good conversation. But one of the things came up was, one of the tactics, or one of the strategies was, to ask how your employees are doing without it being part of a performance review. It's like, how are things going? Without it, and one of the points brought up was, well, what happens if someone discloses something? Like, what happens if that, kind of friendly, how are you doing, turns into something that, where you realize your employee is at risk? And so, I mean, I think gender-based violence kind of falls into that category, that someone might either, disclose something in the workplace, or may just, a supervisor or a coworker or something may suspect that something is off. And what are their options there?
Yeah. So I think in those situations, you're more than welcome to call Artemis at any time and just give us a call and have a chat, like an earnest chat on the phone about what you think might be happening. I think also there are resources to equip yourself ahead of that, to get ready for in case that does happen. So I mentioned earlier the neighbors, friends, and family training, and that's more for community members to take to recognize violence. There's also the Make It Your Business training, which I can send you the links for them, Colin, and you can make them
Absolutely.
available if you'd like. And Make It Your Business is for business owners, and it trains them to support their staff if the disclosure does come forward, and how to spot the signs of possible violence, or ways that they can support in someone maybe making the disclosure if they think
Yeah.
there's something going on. So I can absolutely provide that
Yeah.
that information, and you can pass it along.
I just realized how easy it is for us to slip into, a kind of clinical vocabulary, like disclosure, like who, but I mean, that's kind of the nature of these things, and partly because of the, not sensitivities around it, but just the, there's legalities, and there's all these kinds of things, and word choice becomes, important in a lot of ways for these things. But it does, even catch myself sometimes, I sound more like a robot than a human sometimes when we talk about these things. So,
I
um,
think too, one thing I want to tack on to that is just
yeah,
the concept of safety planning. I didn't speak to that as one of the services that we provide. Because again, it to me, like I forget that just comes with the territory, but folks don't
mm,
maybe know about that piece. And safety planning is a huge part of what we do, and that's working with women to create a plan that's going to keep them safe ultimately. Like it's right in the name. But that can be something too that employers can work on with their employees as well, because it is up to employers to keep their employees safe at work. And when it comes to domestic violence, there could be safety planning that needs to happen to keep that employee safe. And we at the Women's Shelter are more than willing and welcome to working with employers to create safety plans in the workplace as well. So just so that is out there as well. Yeah.
yeah. So we've now talked a bunch about how Artemis Huron, helps folks in the community. I'd like to talk a bit about now how the community can help Artemis Huron, and the ways in which, not just the chamber community, not just the business community, but the ways in which we can support Artemis Huron and its work, to help keep everyone safe. Really, I mean, it's a community effort, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there's lots of ways to get involved. So
I mean, writing a
you
check is the easiest one, right? I mean, that's
always, yes. So yeah, you can directly partner with us through donations, sponsorships, or by hosting awareness campaigns. So that can be an awareness campaign just about Artemis and the services that we provide. If that's something that your business is interested in, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to do something like that. Because those types of events and can create the real tangible change that we need in the community is when we get more people on board with that awareness and those pieces. And it helps to sustain our programs, whether that be donations or awareness. So indirect support can look like creating safe and equitable workplaces, promoting healthy relationships, or simply learning how to recognize and respond to the signs of abuse. Um, with the holidays coming up,
Mhm.
there's always simple but meaningful ways you can support women in the community. We'll be sharing holiday wish lists on the website. So lists of items that women in the families we support need. So we encourage people to shop locally, right here with the chamber member businesses when picking out those items. Gift cards are also a really impactful way to give. It allows women to shop safely and independently for what they need the most. And every business has a role to play in building the culture of safety, dignity, and care that we all want to see in Huron
Mhm.
County.
Yeah, because I mean, you mentioned the gift cards, and I think that's an aspect that some people kind of forget is that women in these situations often lose their financial independence and their ability to access, whatever financial assets they may have had up until recent, whatever their crisis point was, that they often don't have access to that anymore. And so, providing, just get, food and clothing and all those things. And so those gift cards are great. I know because it for one thing, especially when they're local, keeps the spend local, which is nice. And it allows a really tangible way for these women and kids to make the purchases they need to make that we often all take for granted, right? In our situation. So.
Hmm. Yeah, like things like gas too are really valuable for women to be able to get to the appointments because oftentimes the women's shelter is not the most central for where the woman comes from in the county. We have a huge geographic area. So if we've got a
Mhm.
woman here staying with us from Wingham, she needs to get to her doctor's appointment there. That's a bit of a trek to take her vehicle. So gas cards are really appreciated. Even just a Tim Hortons gift card to allow for a woman to take herself out for a cup of coffee. That means so much when you're in a crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is those. I mean, not even luxuries, but those extras, right? That you can't, if when you're concerned about where how you're going to pay for the gas to get your doctor appointment, or I mean, when you're in shelter, you're not worried about where your next meal is coming from necessarily, but there's all those other expenses. To have like I said, to be able to splurge, quote unquote, on a coffee and a donut, which
Yeah.
seems, again, we take these things for granted, but and I think again, to go back to the public perceptions around gender-based violence, I think most people have a fairly narrow idea of what that looks like. Like there's a situation, and then but it's so diverse, right? The stories, and at the AGM a couple weeks ago, there were lots of stories, very, very, powerful stories told at that, or some of the women who've been supported by the shelter, and now Artemis Huron. And what struck me was how different those stories were. There's no, I mean, there are patterns, there are trends, and I'm sure you folks do see the kind of the same thing repeating itself, but every woman's story is unique, right? And you folks, again, I'm from my experience on the board, I know that you're able to tailor your support for those unique stories.
Yes, and we're fortunate that we are able to do that, and we have such a dynamic and flexible team of women that work here that are able to do that. That when a woman comes into our program in whatever capacity they come in, it is entirely up to that woman to guide her healing journey, and we're going to follow her on the path that she chooses. There's going to be guidance from us, of course, like we don't expect somebody to figure it out on their own, but to know that we're here for whatever choice they decide to make next and whatever step they decide to make next, we're right here beside them. I think that's a unique way of providing service, um, and I'm really proud to say that that's the way Artemis does things here. Is it's up to the women, and we follow them through the journey. And it's pretty fantastic to see the stories come to fruition, as you heard the other week. And I hope to keep an eye on our social media because we want to share more of those stories. I think it's really important for folks in our community to hear about the individual women that are being served, because that really truly is the magic that's happening here at Artemis, is the healing for
Yeah.
each woman.
Yeah, and because I think there's been a tendency to not share those stories, out of concerns for privacy, obviously, and it in some cases, might people may feel uncomfortable hearing those stories or sharing them, or it's just not a we like to hear good news. But these are good news stories in many ways. They start out very much not good news stories, but the like I said, the stories at the AGM and others that I've heard over the years um, do a lot of happy endings, right? With the women through the support of Artemis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Good. Well, so we'll start to wrap up here. So I will, so in just wherever you're watching this, the down in the description somewhere, there'll be links to the website and to some of those resources. But again, everyone should feel free to get in touch with Artemis at any time. And especially like you said, if you have even the slightest question for yourself or someone you care for, or a coworker or an employee, that the folks at Artemis can help guide the next step, whatever that is. And again, every situation's going to be different. But I'm very happy to have you on the show today, Genelle. And I wouldn't be doing my job as the promoter in chief of the chamber if I didn't mention that Artemis Huron was the beneficiary of our charity golf tournament this summer, and we were able to provide through the generosity of our members and sponsors a check for $2,000. And again, it's every whether it's $20 or $2,000 or $20,000. I mean, every dollar helps support the women and children in our community, and by extension, our community as a whole. And chamber members have been very keen, eager, willing to support all of those organizations, including yours that serve the community.
Yes, thank you. And we're so grateful to the Chamber for the golf tournament and for all of all of the members for the donations we received throughout the year. We're very grateful for you guys. And yeah, we're here. We're committed to walking beside survivors with dignity, safety, and choice. And please feel free to reach out if you are concerned that you or someone you know may be experiencing gender-based violence. You can reach out to us anytime. And check out our new website at www.artemishuron.ca.
Perfect. And we will have your listing on the chamber website updated by the time this goes to air. We haven't got that quite done yet, but we'll do that by the time this drops into everyone's podcast feeds. Now that you're all subscribed and everything, we'll have that up to date. But I mean, I think as we were talking about before, the email addresses and everything forwards anyway. So if you have the
Yep.
old info, that's fine. You don't need to worry about having the new info right away. But anyway, congratulations on the new identity, the new name. It's very exciting for anyone who's connected to the organization to see this next, this evolution of the organization that I think reflects a real evolution of the organization over the last few years, but also the last 40 plus, as you said, that it's grown. So, thanks again for coming on the show. Always good to chat with you, Genelle, and I'm sure we will bump into each other at an event somewhere at some point in the next little while.
All right. Thank you so much, Colin. I appreciate you having me.